We warmly welcome everyone to the C3S institutional dialogue on the topic Decoding India-China Disengagement with Colonel S. Dinny, a former commanding officer, Pangong Battalion. Before I read out his bio and give an introduction, may I request Komodo Vasan sir, Director C3S, to give the opening remarks, please?
Thank you, Bala. It's a great pleasure for all of us in C3S to invite Colonel Dinny. He's not new to us. He's been with us before and he's been in the field, where it matters. So he's aware of the topography, he's aware of the recent developments, and he's a regular contributor to many journals and other magazines. So it's a great pleasure for all of us to listen to him today, particularly in the context of what is happening at the border. I think China took everybody by surprise by agreeing to withdraw. And it's happened because of many factors, including India's resistance to China's aggressive behavior. And therefore, this was unexpected outcome. Nobody expected this to finish so soon. But the fact that India stood firm, the fact that nine rounds were done, and it has yielded good results in favor of India. Not that it is the end. I would look at it as the beginning of a new chapter. So, with this brief introduction, though I may have a little more to say, I'll join in later. I will be listening out. So, it's open to Colonel Dinny, who I'm sure, based on his first-hand experience, will be able to tell us what is it that happened and what is the way ahead for the two countries and what more can India do to prevent such surprises in future. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. To give a brief introduction about Colonel Dinny, he has served in the Indian Army Infantry Rajput Regiment officer for more than 20 years. He has got first-hand combat operational experience after having served in multiple tenures in Kashmir Valley, Northeast India, and along the line of actual control in Ladakh. In Kashmir, served both along the line of control and in Rashtriya Rifles over 3 tenure. He also served as a military observer with United Nations in Congo, commanded an infantry battalion at Pangong for 2 years. After command of battalion, he was nominated for the prestigious Higher Defense Management course twice. He was also posted as a faculty in the prestigious Defense Services Staff College, Wellington, Tamil Nadu. He took voluntary retirement from the Indian Army on 1st of October 2019, after which he is pursuing his MPhil in Defense and Strategic of interest also includes strategic studies, counterterrorism, leadership, civil military relations, and nation building. To give a brief introduction of the topic, recently both India and China have announced the start of disengagement between the two armies in Ladakh. As an ongoing process, the current disengagement is limited to 2 places on the line of actual control in Ladakh. The disengagement in other regions is yet to be taken. As per the agreement reached by both sides last week, the PLA soldiers were seen dismantling sanghas and other temporary structures they had built, and heavy machines were seen restoring the landform to what it was before the April-May of 2020. Today, in C3S Institutional Dialogue, we have with us Colonel Dinny, who will discuss the takeaways from the longest ever standoff along the line of actual control. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today, and over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shri Bala. Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to place my sincere gratitude to C3S for inviting me yet again. It's indeed a matter of great honor and privilege to me to be speaking to such eminent personalities as I can see on the screen. And special thank to Commodore R. Vasan, the director of C3S, and Shri Bala Subramaniam, the research officer, and to each one of you for joining today and also for inviting me here. So this is my second time with C3S. I last spoke on 25th of September 2020. So that was precisely 141 days after the standoff between India and China started. So that was the time when we spoke last. And there also I remember covering a lot of issues. And one of the things which I take a lot of pride in mentioning here is that, for one, I always believe that we will be able to achieve status quo. I mean, people will ask that how did you, why, what made you feel? It is just that maybe because I served there, so probably that experience either biased me towards it or whatever may be the reason. But I was pretty convinced from day one, and all my articles and other places, I've been saying that that we will be able to achieve status quo someday. So from there, I'll take on. So today, what we are going to do is I will just recap briefly on what I covered on 25th of September. So to just to put things in perspective, after almost another 100 days, it's almost another 100 days now we are having this seminar. So it will just give us perspective what was there in somewhere in the middle, how the situation was, and what today how it is. Then I will just briefly touch upon theories of why, and then why did actually China do this. I mean, everybody is surprised. Even the foreign minister himself mentioned that he himself doesn't know what is the exact reason. Very eminent China watchers and like Anand Krishnan, all these people have mentioned that they still can't they can't put their finger on exactly why China did. But I will give out my own version, my own belief that why did China do this. And as Shri Bala mentioned last, I will be speaking on certain takeaways both for India and China, and also the way ahead. So I'll finish it about 30 to 40 minutes max, and then I'll be open to questions, because I think that is where the interaction maximum takes place. So I will just briefly go back, as I mentioned, on 25th of September, what I spoke, and I started off by saying that, okay, after 141 days of this conflict, what has China gained and what has India gained, and what has China lost and what did India lose? So I mentioned that China's gains, and first of all, was approximately 24 square kilometers of disputed territory because of their first mover advantage which they had. This I mentioned then. And it's important to see this then, because then only once we come to the present situation, we will be able to relate, is our assessment right? I can see General Narasimhan sir. Sir, I'll take a minute. So pleasure to see you, sir. It's actually, to speak in front of you is also a little bit of a thing. I hope I'll do justice, sir. So, and because he is a legendary person as far as army is known as in army and otherwise. So as I was continuing, that the China's gains was that approximately 24 square kilometers of territory which they had occupied in the area of North Bank. Then what they did was unilaterally changed status quo along the LAC, which means they brought in more troops, which was not otherwise allowed. They forced India to mobilize, okay, which was for a likely longer period of deployment, which otherwise would not have happened. And of course, on the Galwan issue, they inflicted casualties onto the Indian army. This was what the Chinese had gained after about 100 days of stand. And now, once you now relate, what did they? I'll come to that. That what is the present gain? So then things will become clearer. Now let's say, what did China lose? The first and foremost loss, which after even 100 days, was that in that issue they allowed differences to become disputes, and disputes to become permanent scars in India. The public perception changed hugely against them, and somewhere down the line, I think they lost a partner for a very long time in the coming times. Secondly, of course, they had a loss of face even then, even after 100 days after Galwan, they had a loss of face both internationally and of course in India and all. And that peaceful rise image, which the Chinese always wanted to project, that they are a peaceful country, their rise is peaceful, that I think was damaged permanently. Now, of course, then by this time, 25th of September, we had already taken over Kailash ranges well within our LAC, but that loss of dominating heights was certainly a loss for China. And they also lost many soldiers, which even as late as, last week, we have reports mentioning up to 45 casualties. And then, of course, then economic losses and all those other things, they actually pushed India towards a closer Indo-US style. The Quad has come out in the open. All these things were China's losses as per my understanding. Now, what is India's loss? Let's come to India. Now, as on 25th of September, when about 100 days of this dispute was, 141 days of this dispute was over, we had, somewhere we were not having the control of 24. Why I say 24 is, 8 kilometers is the width of that finger 4 and finger 8, and about 3 kilometers, not actually 3 kilometers, it's only a road. But then let's say that because the reaches also were occupied. So let's say the 8 into 3, 24 square kilometers was the loss, or we didn't have the control in that disputed territory. That was a loss. And of course, a loss of our soldiers. And we were forced to mobilize. I mean, we were forced to mobilize in a large scale. And of course, that will have its own cost. And we were also, and that time I had mentioned that there will be a likely deployment of troops during winters. and the issues related to the winter's thing. I think this was our loss, and of course our gain was at that point of time was, we had achieved operation and logistics balance in the high altitude warfare. By that time we had achieved that. We had gained strategic advantages, even though it's a tactical move on the Kailash ranges. And most importantly, I think what we achieved was that there was a notion of India standing up to China, which was widely acknowledged by the global community, and I think it was widely acknowledged that. And of course, the other issues like all was India's gain, that the Quad and the other shifting of closer relation to US, Rafale being pushed up, and all those were, I think, India's gains as far as this comes. So now you see that after about 5 months itself, this this thing was there, and if you see now after 5 months, nothing much had changed, except for the fact now that the Chinese are going back. So what they had gained, when I told that territory of approximately 24 square kilometers, that according to the new agreement, it is now being vacated by them. So I see, and also the unilateral change of status quo which along the LAC, I think as part of the agreement, subsequent, it will be a phased manner. They will go back on that also. So whatever the Chinese had, that limited gain, of course, we also have to vacate our the occupation of Kailash ranges in some places. But if you see what gains the Chinese had then, even if it is only a small little territory and other change of status, those things have gone. And I think today we are much stronger. We come out much stronger in these agreements of de-escalation followed by disengagement. So that is what I wanted to try to I wanted to highlight. That was right after about within about 3 to 4 months, 5 months of conflict, the same situation was there, and that is the reason why I am tempted to believe that Chinese may not have had a strategic intent of coming and to do this. That's my humble submission, because if they had, today, like even that time also we had mentioned that there were a lot of strategic objectives attributed to the Chinese. Okay, it was like territorial gain. They wanted to come and to grab a lot of land as per their own policy of nibble and then negotiate, those kind of things. That did not happen. Now they're vacating that. Then the vulnerability to Aksai Chin, the mention of that Article 370 was announced by the government. So now that has provoked them to do this. That also doesn't seem to be true. Then some people mentioned perceived Indo-US close relations. I don't think that has forced India to stay away from US. Did not happen. Some said that because of our increased infrastructure development along the border area, they forced us to send a message that don't do it. I don't think we have stopped our construction or our infrastructure development. In fact, even just the moment the conflict started, I think we all heard news of lot many workers going from Bihar and other places and completing lot many tasks in much faster form. So that was also not the reason. Then there was a mention of threatening of DSDBO road and strategic assets when the Galwan issue and all was after from vacating from Galwan. That also doesn't seem to be true. Then there were also talk of imposing a cost on India by making LCization of LAC. That was the word which they used, that they wanted to convert the LAC into an LC thing, so that there is a cost incurred for India. Now with this agreement, again, that also doesn't seem to be true, because if they're vacating, naturally the subsequent steps will be status quo ante as of April 2020. So that thing also doesn't rise. The latest addition to the claim is the 1959 claim. I'm sure everybody is a learned person here. We all know what was the 1959 claim. Today, what is the position of the Chinese with respect to the 1959 claim? We never agreed to any 1959 claim. So that this 1959 claim again is, I think, like a Chennai pitch, which was a turner. Somebody was just trying to become a good spinner by just putting those googlies. I don't think it is not. So what I'm trying to say is that if all this was the strategic objective which various learned people, both academicians, practitioners all mentioned, and if today China is going back, it's very difficult for me to believe that they just went back without achieving any of these goals. So my hypothesis is that probably they did not have a strategic intent. For me, my theory, and which I've been telling from day one, is that this is probably a classical example of how a tactical level of issue manifested itself into a huge strategic issue. there are so many incidents with along the LAC and LOC and all. We know that a minor issue somewhere, it rapidly fires into other sectors, and it can go on and on. It can go into a spiral. My thing is that this probably was another case, and why I say so is, now coming to how I would just want to build that probable story, that how probably this could have happened, and I speak based on my experience there. Now, we all know that on 5th of 6th May, there was reports of clash at North Pangong, and this has been confirmed by both the nations, that there was a clash on 5th/6th May on the North Bank at Pangong, and there were casualties from both sides. And later on, we also saw videos of some soldiers protecting some PLA officer. There was a vehicle which was being thrashed and such like things. So this was happening on the North Bank in the month of May, first week. And let me also tell you that these incidents used to happen previously also. And when I was also there, these kind of issues used to happen. That is precisely because that both countries do not agree to a common LAC. And that's so if you are going to say that my LAC is till finger 8, I will go till finger 8. That is my task, and there is no way that I can be stopped from going to finger 8. And similarly, PLA, for whatever it is, they are a professional army, they will also come till finger 4. Now, and there is hardly anything which can, there's no way for any maneuver between these two places. There's on one side there is a lake, and the other side there is a mountain spur. So when the troops come in close contact, there is bound to be clash, and this has happened in the past. And this time also, I think the violent clash took place on North Bank, resulting in serious casualties on both sides. Luckily, I think both sides, at least the Indian side did not have any fatal casualty. I'm not very sure about the Chinese side, whether they suffered fatal casualties or not. Now, after that, they were provoked in a much in a much higher way, when on 9th May, in the area of Sikkim, another Nakula, there was another incident, and this time it was reported widely in Indian media that there was a young lieutenant who punched the Chinese officer, and there was blood and all those things, and there was a lot of stories being written on at least on the Indian media. We found that this happened on 9th of May. Now, after this, you find suddenly that there was an escalation in 4 different places on the north of Pangong. So nothing was happening on the south of Pangong, on the north of Pangong, that is in the area of Galwan, in the area of PP15, in the area of Gogra. So all these 3 places also suddenly and the Chinese, what they did was, of course, in by May, you find that a lot of exercises happened, which is the annual feature. They moved an quantum of troops to these places, and that was a surprising factor, and that was the first time when they changed the status quo unilaterally in a drastic manner. The scale of the troops which was brought, the speed at which they were brought was totally caught the Indians by surprise. There's nothing like, we did not surprise is something which anybody, we can't get into the mind that actually what he's going to do. But the fact is that they had a first mover advantage, and they moved in troops in close proximity to LAC, and at places like in PP15 and others, they crossed the LAC also. And there also there's a problem is of perception, that we say that it is up till that place, the others, the Chinese say no, this is not the place, and they try to push also. After this, if you take your mind back, I think May happened, and June 5th was the Corps Commander level talks. There were talks at the even when this was happening, there were the BPMs, the Border Personnel Meeting was happening, and on 5th of June, the Corps Commander level, for the first time, the highest military level conference was taken to the Corps Commander level. That was the first time which was happening. So there again, there was this talk of disengagement, and it was agreed that probably we will carry out a disengagement. And after having agreed to that, the ground commanders, or the brigade commanders, battalion commanders, were supposed to go on ground and verify how it is to be done. And on 15th of June, the unfortunate incident of Galwan comes, and during the process of disengagement, there's a clash between the troops, and there is casualties on both sides. And then the things never got back into what both the commanders want, the way they wanted probably the disengagement would take place. So I believe that Galwan incident is probably the turning point, after which 2 things happened. One, the Indian public perception against China went up to a very great extent. no government could have now turned a blind eye of what is happening on the Ladakh issue. So therefore, the Chinese knew that there was nothing now which will stop the Indian government in taking drastic measures. So therefore, we now saw a lot many troops further being pumped in, and the Chinese now did not know how to extricate out of them, because they knew that the public perception, because the bodies were coming back, and and naturally it is but natural that the public will feel the anger, and the way they were fought, there was not a single bullet which was fired, and they were the photographs of the primitive weapons and all those other things were out, and so there was a massive anger against China. Now all the plans of disengagement froze there. So the Chinese now were looking for an honorable exit. Now, how do they get an honorable exit? If they had done what they're doing right now, imagine the impact what it would have. Even now, those photographs which shows the troops moving back from China itself is creating a lot of thing after even 5 months. Now, imagine if in June or July, if they had agreed to it. Okay, now let's disengage. I think China would have had a huge loss of face, both internationally and probably within China itself. So they played the game of take it as long as possible. Let's extend this. So they had multiple levels of talks. The almost 9 times the corps commander level talks were held. The basic game was just to delay it as much as possible, so that from the public focus, from the media attention, all these things are away, and then probably they can disengage. And they were also, I think, looking at somewhere once the US elections are over. Now, as you see, most of the people are now talking of economy. At least in India, if you see the farmers, the protests have taken over the screen space. The US elections before that, and today, India, China, the talks are much on a much lesser scale than what was there probably in June, July. So one thing is that it has taken away from the focus, and now the Chinese are slowly but steadily they're descending. So what I'm trying to say was that the Chinese did not anticipate the kind of reaction Indians would do in the first place. Secondly, Galwan was an unintended kind of an action, and after Galwan, there was no way that India could have done anything less than what they have done now, which is to show a massive deployment. And also, one more important thing which turned the tables was the August 29th, 30th action by the Indian forces of occupying those Kailash ranges. Now, we must understand that till that time, we did not have a bargaining chip, because now the Chinese had unilaterally changed the status quo, both by placing themselves between finger 4 and finger 8, and also bringing massive amount of troops along the LAC. So now, after having done this, on 29th oblique 30th, by occupying those heights on the Kailash range well within our side of LAC, but a huge change of status quo, that caught the Chinese by surprise. And now they were now further inclined to have a exit as early as possible, because this game will never finish. Because if one thing is, we are clear that if both countries do not want war, then all actions below war will keep happening. So there's no end to it. If you go and occupy some other place, then Indians also have an option of going and occupying some other place. They also will go. Where does this end? So this, I think, surely would have been seen by the Chinese, and that is how this particular time, when the things are a little lighter. So I think that is the time when they're chosen to move out, or to make an exit as fast as possible. And also, like we would have seen that they wanted us to see that they were moving. Like just like when they came in, they wanted us to see that they have come in, they have occupied, they are ready. They wanted to show the tanks, they wanted to show the artillery guns being placed, they wanted to show all the structures. Now also they wanted to show the sincerity in moving back, and that is how all these photographs and all was seen. Otherwise, it's very easy for them to move out in the night or something like that without much of the photographs and all being. But they wanted us to see that they are serious about the exit of the disengagement, and that is how all those photographs also are coming. So this is my understanding, that probably they did not have a strategic objective, and I mean, even if they had, I'm sure by the facts they have not achieved it. But that is why, and knowing China, I don't think they will get into something without having planned in a big manner. And the at least, of course, Indian stand must have definitely surprised them. But still, I feel that the strategic objective, as was brought out earlier by many, probably may not be the case. Now, what is the way ahead? As I see it, is that the disengagement as we speak is still going on. It is not de-escalation which is going on. It is just the first phase, which is the disengagement. De-escalation can only happen when the troops which are inducted from outside also moves out. So that will take a little more time, is what I understand. But the good thing which is that a no patrolling zone agreement has been arrived at, which is a very good thing. In fact, I also tweeted that way back in 2019, I had written on the print, and when I wrote on the print that and that time there was nothing happening, but I had wrote that in case the first best case scenario is to resolve the border issue, which in the practical sense I don't think it is going to happen in the near future. But the next best thing is to have a no patrolling zone in all the disputed area. Today we have the ways and means of surveillance through UAV and all those. So if both the parties agree that we will not come into this disputed area, I think that will bring down the chances of conflict drastically. Now, because unless troops come in close contact, the chances of conflict is very less. Now, if for example, where there are no disputes, okay, I'll just give you a hypothetical example that there is a point where there is no dispute. Okay, so one day one part patrol comes, they go back. The next day the next patrol comes, they go back. But the problem is in places like North Bank, where there is a dispute, and when both the patrols come together, now both will not budge. So there's a very there's a high chance of troops in close contact getting into a scuffle, because as there's a famous saying that the troops in close contact derive their a logic of their own, which is quite different from whatever the strategic objectives may be. So they are not bothered about what did Prime Minister Modi agree to with Xi Jinping. They have a task and they will do it. So if there is something which they don't like, they will react on ground. So that leadership and all comes into play, but it's a very, very sensitive issue. So I think that this no patrolling zone agreement, although it's a temporary measure, but it's a good thing for reducing the chances of conflict. Then the way ahead also means that I know there is a trust deficiency to a great extent. I think after 62, the present issue must have it has created a lot of trust deficiency between both sides. So it will be good if both sides, at least along the LAC, if we can normalize the relations in a manner that those ceremonial BPMs and all which used to take place. I know it will take some time, but when I spoke to some people, one of those officers and all who were there, they said already when this particular disengagement is taking place, the troops between the officers and all, they were much more friendlier than what they were earlier. So I think things will slowly go back to normal scenario wherein the ceremonial border personal meetings and all can take place. The troops to troops friendly contact can take place. The joint exercise and all can take. This will only lead to peace and tranquility in the area, which I strongly feel is the need of the hour, because we don't want a situation in our border wherein we are constantly tied down by such things, because we have, I think, much important things to do as a nation. So that's what I feel is the way ahead as far as the LAC is concerned. And also maybe we have to I think General Narasimhan is there. I'm sure that there is a need to look at this mechanism of the border management, this whole LAC agreements and all, because for so many years it has stood its ground, but then there are problems there when one side does not adhere to the agreements, or there is a unilateral even misinterpreting of what is the LAC and all those things. So, and sometimes it may be genuine also. Like what I understand is that because since the LAC is now just for the people who do not know what goes there. Now imagine, I as a commanding officer of that battalion which was there at North Bank, I do not know for exactly that where does the Chinese think his LAC is in many areas. I only presume that probably this is the area where he thinks it is there. So that presumption is there on both sides. Unless you have a written or a map being exchanged, at least where we know that what are the differences. Those things are also not done. So I think today both nations should sit together and at least get that thing, some mechanism in place for LAC management, at least how both countries will deal. Otherwise, it is just a matter of time when another round of such violent clashes will take place. Then I, for one, believe that there has to be a very strong strategic guidance for military, which was one of the issues which was there after the Doklam issue, and I remember once the Prime Minister went to Wuhan and that agreement was signed. One of the issue was this key issue was the strategic guidance for military. And why I say so is that, as I mentioned earlier also, that at like we all say that any foreign policy implementation is done by the last 100 meters by the soldiers on ground. So it is very important that both sides understand that there is a requirement to maintain peace and tranquility at all times, without compromising on whatever the territorial integrity and the task which is given to you. Yet, this also I have written before also on this, that at times the Indian side officers, they get confused by by the way they are operating along the line of control. Sometimes they take the template from the line of control scenario into the line of actual control scenario, and the Chinese officers think that we are still in 1962. They can boss around and they can bully around, and so this kind of clashes also take place, which if not stopped at the right level at the right time, you will find that then things will go clearly out of control, and which I think is one of those examples what we've seen now. Then a few takeaways which is debatable also, that let's speak of first China. We always looked upon China as somebody who is very systematic, they planned, and I myself have seen that for a small platoon level exercise, they used to take 7 months to plan and bring out what they want and how do they want. But for them to make such a big strategic blunder, if I can put it, by getting into this, I really doubt that, are we overrating their strategic vision, or what is it exactly? How could they not read the kind of thing which could have probably happened? Then there will be definitely questions on who controls the PLA. I know that Xi Jinping has a lot of control now, that since he's taken over, but still the questions will be asked that who controls the PLA? How much of control does the highest political leadership have? Also, the information warfare. Information warfare is also one of the things in which we looked upon China with a lot of think that they are much ahead in whatever they wanted to do. They are good, there's no doubt. But what I could see this time was that their propaganda many times was so blatant or even substandard that people were making a lot of trolls here in India. So this, of course, they had this media coverage and all of the issue in India very well, because the way some of the stories which kept on rotating in Indian media, we showed that they had a plan in mind. But then still, information warfare, a lot of lessons which we can take, which we can learn from Chinese, both the pros and cons. Another thing which they showed was their by their speedy mobilization, was that at the tactical level their combat readiness is very good. There's no doubt, because and the next point also related to that is that their infrastructure development is so good that they could mobilize in a very short time. And now once they're disengaging, they're disengaged in a very short time. So that we must take a note of, that they are able to do. That's why the surprise next time, how can we be surprised? Those kind of options exist with them. As far as India goes, I think one thing which this issue has brought out is that people like General Narasimhan have been for years been writing about China and been discussing, but this whole issue has been now brought into the focus, firmly into the public of Indian public, that they know now that there is a Chinese who is there in the borders, northern borders, and there is a requirement of lot of focus there. There is a requirement for infrastructure development. There is a requirement of budget allocation, capability building. All these things focus has been by this particular conflict. It is there, and of course the Atmanirbhar Bharat issue also, I think, has found a lot of speed because of this. And one important and interesting aspect which I found was different from other conflict was this: the whole of nation approach which was adopted. I think even in Kargil and all, we saw that it was a more of a military diplomatic kind of a approach. But here in this Chinese case, we saw the economic aspect coming into it. We saw the diplomatic, military, and other aspects also coming into. A lot of other issues were also we saw that coming into it. So this whole of nation approach, I think, worked, and in the coming times, I think this is going to stay. So this is what I look at as a lot of other takeaways also, but broadly speaking, these are the things which I feel is relevant. So finally, before I open up for questions and whatever I know, I'll be able to answer. But my again, I strongly feel that probably Chinese did not have a strategic objective as was planned, was told, or what was narrated to us, or they failed so badly and miserably that then there are questions about their strategic visions. So the whole thing of what did they gain, stares them in the face that it is very difficult for them to justify anything now that they've done. My only thing is that and I am not looking at it as a victory or a loss of anything. It is because still the process of disengagement and de-escalation and all is happening. I don't want to give it a okay, India is won and China is lost. No, I don't look at it that way. I think what I definitely can say is that India has emerged stronger. There's no doubt. There was they tried to bully us for whatever objectives they wanted to do it, and and finally I'll say that the probable objective which they had was to teach the Indian army along the LAC a lesson. That don't, and that's why I think I was hearing Anant also was mentioning that this narrative in China was that that India was nibbling, and Chinese forces are taking strong actions against it. So probably that also is there, that they wanted to, because as I said, this perception problem of where is the LAC, that if you look at from the Chinese end, they probably felt that we are making an overreach, and with after all the surgical strikes and all those things, they are not very sure that what India may do, and I think they overreacted in some case, in cases that which led to the kind of a thing in which they could not extricate themselves in a manner in which they wanted. So finally, I think after all this, it's a good thing that today they are moving back, and I hope the agreements stand in other friction areas also, and especially this no patrolling zone conflict in disputed areas critical for peace and tranquility, and in the best interest of both nations, I think we should move towards that, and so that there are lesser conflict, because the conflict does not help anybody. That's what I believe. Thank you very much for the patience, for your patient hearing, and I know it's I repeat, it's just my thoughts based on my experience. I may be terribly wrong, so please pardon me if I'm off the mark, whatever probably you may not be thinking. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Bala, before you open it, I would just like to say a few things, and then you can open it up for the question answer session. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the presence of General Narasimhan, Alka Acharya, and other dignitaries who are here, and our own senior member, Mr. Shivraman. So it's a pleasure to see so many people right now here with us. And as it's not the first time that we are listening to Colonel Dinny, he's not at all disappointed us. The fact that he served there in the field and he's been the DS in Defense Services Staff College tells you how well he's prepared in presenting facts and figures and analysis. You may or may not agree with all the assessment that he's made, but the point is that having been there, he's really brought to fore as to whether there was a strategic dividend in terms of what China achieved, and who got out better. So before we throw open the floor to others, may I request General Narasimhan and thereafter Alka Acharya to just say a few words so that there is greater clarity on what we are trying to address today. With that, may I request General Narasimhan to kindly come up?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Commodore Watson, for that remark, and then asking me to give my remarks. A couple of things I just wanted to pick from what Colonel Dinny had very eloquently and very, very nicely put across to people as to what happened and what is actually on the ground. One thing that we need to keep in mind is, particularly in the month of May, when all these incidents started happening, one thing is that incidents were actually drawn apart in the sense that Eastern Ladakh was also being engaged, Sikkim was also being engaged. So my understanding at that time, if you see my recordings of the TV programs I had participated in at that time, I had mentioned at least till the Western Theatre Command level, the planning should have happened. Otherwise, simultaneously having incidents going across on both the ends of the spectrum would have been very difficult to handle for a local commander otherwise. So therefore, it may not be so tactical as one sees it, but it could be at least at the operational level it would have been planned. Later on, when things went, of course, down south, then the things would have been further pushed up and the Central Military Commission would have been involved in this. The second question is on the motive. Motive has always been questioned ever since this incident happened. There are any number of theories which Colonel Dinny had brought out very correctly. Nobody will be able to point a finger as to what was the motive at this point in time, at least. And I am not sure whether he'll be able to do it in future also. But any one of those that he listed and described could have been the reason. There are many people who ask why have we left the South Bank. This has been in the question ever since this agreement happened and the disengagement started taking place. Please understand, even in the month of May and June, we were insisting on going back to status quo as it existed in the month of April. You can't, when you negotiate, you can't say, I will come and occupy in August and I'll continue to stay there, but you go back from wherever you came in the month of May. It doesn't work in a negotiation like that. So, best thing is that we need to understand that yes, that operation was done with a particular purpose and that purpose has been achieved. That is number one. Number two, there are enough measures put in place with that engagement part, basically to say that if a thing like this happens again, like for example, the Chinese are wanting to come back again and do something, please be rest assured that there are adequate measures that have been put in place to ensure it doesn't happen. May it be in terms of ISR, may it be in terms of a written agreement, may it be in terms of watching the areas in the depth, whichever way it is. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. There's a lot of question which has come up on the casualties which the Chinese are supposed to have recognized today. Please understand, they only said, if you read the Global Times, the original article which came out in the morning from where everybody has taken off everywhere, they have only said one thing, that 5 people have been recognized for awards who have been killed in that operation. That does not mean that there were not more casualties. There would have been definitely more casualties. If you look at it, even in the month of June, TASS, Russians mentioned 43. A couple of days ago, they have mentioned 45. So somewhere in the range of, if not 40s, at least definitely more than what we had suffered casualties would have happened at that particular point in time. Lastly, the disengagement process is in the process. And after we finish this, within the 48 hours of this finishing, we are supposed to be having the next Corps Commander level talks. And in that, the other areas of friction points are going to be taken into account. I see that somebody has talked about Depsang in the chat box. So all those things are going to be addressed. So please be rest assured, because if we all can think of these options which are given in the chat box, please understand the people who are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis would have definitely thought about these issues and will take care of it. So with that verse, I'll finish my remarks. If there are any questions later, we'll discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Narasimhan. I think it was very reassuring to hear from you, who is also part of the National Security Advisory Board. And along with the presentation by Colonel Dinny, it really reassures the audience here that everything is under control. And on a dispassionate analysis, it's clear that we have gained a lot of ground. The other thing is now, may I also request Dr. Alka Acharya, if she's around, to kindly chip in with a few words on her assessment of the presentation. Over to you, Dr. Alka.
Oh dear, I had no intention of speaking or saying anything. I had basically joined it for my edification. In fact, I really have nothing to say, because the ground reality, army maneuvers, geographical locations of different positions. I mean, these are things which we really cannot speak about. We don't know what the reality is out there. And in fact, I have actually been very hesitant to speak on the situation, because we don't know what's happening. Even things like calculations on the Chinese side, everybody is saying we don't know what the calculations were. So I think I'm not to get into that, because I am still trying to, in fact, I'm working on a larger piece, which is looking more at the implications for India-China relations, political, economic, and strategic, from this encounter and this entire episode. I'm still trying to analyze what it means, because it's quite clear that there is going to be a fundamental change in the way in which India and China will engage. What seems to me very interesting is that we do not have any kind of very strong, very significant statements from the official sources about this whole episode. We've had statements saying that we will not cede our territory. So, apart from that, there has been a fairly interesting, I would say, silence about this whole thing to begin with, and then now this disengagement. We are looking at a situation where there is speculation whether we are going back to the original proposal. We are looking at people making an argument for new element entering the India-China boundary dispute, which is that now the sovereignty issue has been raised by the Chinese, not just a matter of dispute. So if we take all these factors, it's quite clear that there is going to be a fundamental change in many ways across the political and strategic spectrum. On the other hand, you can see that there is, on both sides, a fairly clear intent to get back to the business of doing business, to get back to at least bringing some degree of, normalcy is not quite the right word, but bringing some degree of momentum back into the ties, particularly in the economic sphere. And we've also seen that there is a great deal of caution with which the government, and rightly so, I believe that this is a matter requiring extreme caution, with which the government is also moving in the direction of, even Colonel Dinny mentioned about the Quad being a kind of a benefit. I don't agree with that. I don't think, because if I look at what the Indian government position is, they're moving fairly steadily towards that. But I don't think they are ready to position the Quad as some kind of framework for containing China. That's really out of the question. So it's a very measured, very calculated kind of a way in which the Indian government is moving to ensure that this relationship does not get derailed, even as it is acknowledged that this is going to be a fairly new kind of framework, not exactly framework, but a new kind of way in which we are going to look at each other. So I'm just going to stop there. As I said, this is a work in progress. I'm still trying to piece together many puzzles that seem to me are still in this entire imbroglio, if you will. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alka. Thank you for all those inputs which complement the presentation made by Colonel Dinny and also the assessment by General Narasimhan. Now I'll request Bala to take over and conduct the balance proceedings on Q&A. I am low on my mobile, so in case I go off, I'll request either General Narasimhan, if he's still around, or Mr. Shivaraman to wind up the proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Shivani, can you please take up the questions from the chat?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The first question is from Mr. KV Thomas. He has appreciated your presentation, and his question relates to your hypothesis that Chinese intrusion into Ladakh was a tactical sporadic venture, as you negate the prominent theories of Chinese watchers. Can you simplify the Chinese move, especially in the backdrop of China's systematic moves for the last few years to emerge as superpower in Indian Ocean? Obviously, India-China relation remained tense as early as 1959.
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think some of the answers to that question, why I think so, I think Alka ma'am has mentioned it. Like, if you see the peculiarity of this particular conflict, as rightly brought out by Professor Dr. Alka, that both the political leadership of both countries were extremely, they actually downplayed it to a great extent. And there was no great state, even for that matter, even the foreign ministry and from both sides did not have any kind of thing which you probably see between India and Pakistan or China and on the Taiwan issue. With the India-China thing, both wanted to play it down, and that, as she rightly mentioned, that was the right thing to do. So the fact that they played it down showed that somewhere through the back channels or something, that the intention of each other were, of course, being gods. But thing is that both wanted peace to take place. They didn't want this to escalate into a war kind of a situation. Number one. Number two, unlike in previous any other cases, the thing was that it will be a military commander conference, which actually has now brought the also have led to the disengagement. Even although even in Galwan, before Galwan also, it was a military commander, that is a corps commander level talks was taken. So my belief is that the optics of military problem being solved at the military level was what was aimed at by doing. Of course, the decisions would have been taken at the highest level, but still the insistence of it was not a diplomatic foreign secretary level, unlike in previous cases and all. But why that, that talks have to be held at Chushul Moldo garrison at that place was this particular thing, that it was a military problem and the military commanders will sit together and solve it under the guidance of the political leadership, respective political leadership. So that was second thing, which again, because of the understanding at the highest level, probably that this was not, something which both sides wanted it to be at in the first place. So they wanted to. Third, my personal take is that the relation between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, for all you can, and they have met so many times, continues to be good, is what I understand. And I'm sure in the future, in the coming days also, probably you will see a meeting between the two also. And during the entire crisis, there was never, a personal thing on from both sides. So I think at the highest level, probably they wanted this thing to happen. So that is why I believe that probably at the start itself, people understood that this was not something which was, of that kind of a nature which people wanted to believe. It probably was a incident which happened, and of course now both countries have to come out of it in an honorable manner. Now, regarding your second question, that can you simplify the Chinese move, especially in the background China's systematic moves for the past few years to emerge as superpower? I think we see. Indian Ocean region, Chinese presence is a fact. There's no denying that they are looking for dominance in the Indian Ocean region as in other parts of the area. One thing which definitely would have played on the minds of Chinese is that during this, and one more thing which I forgot to mention was that we must understand the backdrop or the background or the period in which this thing happened. It was just after the coronavirus had had taken over the world, in a big way, and there was a huge backlash which the Chinese were facing because of this corona thing. To the extent that Donald Trump clearly mentioned China virus and Wuhan virus and such like this. Now, any country or any political leadership who's facing this is bound to be insecure also. So, at that point of time, there were a lot of other issues in the South China Sea. There was Trump, who was doing extreme, eccentricities of his own kind, and so many other things were happening. So all this thing also probably may have, people would have thought that, okay, and Indian, the political leadership has a history of, surgical strikes and all. I can share with something like, when the surgical strikes took place, when our petrol went with the Chinese, and we were on good, those things, we were on good terms. They asked to my company commander that you carried out a surgical strike. Would you carry out a surgical strike on us also? So my company commander then mentioned, we don't strike friends. So this is his comment which he said, and then they had a hearty laugh and then they went. So what I'm trying to say is these kind of issues also play into the minds of the opponent, that what probably we are thinking and what we are trying to do. So I think these are not related in that because they are doing it in they are dominant because they are dominant. They want to dominate in the Indian Ocean. Naturally, they would also like to do that on the borders also. It's a thing which Chinese psyche, which is there in their diplomacy and all other aspects, which they see now that their time has come. So those kind of things definitely there.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Mr. Bala Subramanian. Center for Policy Research in 2012 came out with a non-alignment 2.0 strategy document in which it advocated for taking a prompt quid pro quo military operation in Chinese territory in case of escalation. Is it possible today's geopolitical scenario our actions are always projected as a response to Chinese actions.
Shri Bala, could you just explain that question to me, because I'm not very clear that what exactly are you looking at?
No, sir, in the policy document, it was advocated taking a quid pro quo into the going into the Chinese territory, occupying spaces, and using that as a bargaining chip in our negotiations with China. In today's geopolitical scenario, is that possible? Because our response is always seen as a response to a Chinese action. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, those are, I think, in the those are, as I put it, it's a military options which are available, like what General Narasimhan also mentioned. There are a lot of options available. Which one of the options which you mentioned is to go inside, the Chinese controlled territory. Now we have to be very careful when we use the term, because if you say Chinese territory, so then there's there is a lot of confusion between when people say Chinese territory and Indian territory. It is we consider the entire Aksai Chin as our territory. So Chinese controlled territory. So there are options available. There are plans. I'm sure every military person will know that there will be plans in such manner. But the problem is that there is a risk of escalation. If whatever you do, let's see the example of this South Bank issue itself. We had occupied heights along the Kailash range well within our side of LAC, and that was considered as a major escalation in the escalatory matrix, which, as General Narasimhan rightly mentioned, gave us the bargaining power to to get China to agree terms which are favorable to us, or what we find as in April 2020. So if that is the case, imagine what will be the impact if we go across and do something, which I think it will have a huge ramification. So it will all depend upon what is the action to which Indians are reacting. But as you rightly mentioned, that most of our actions, because we as a policy do not initiate actions, as I see it for the last so many years, whatever I've read and seen, India has never been the initiator in any of the cases. So I don't think that drastic changes will happen. But definitely these options and plans do exist. These are things which, as and when required, can be executed.
Next question is from Commodore Ravi Mani. What is the possibility of this being a testing of the waters, with the possibility of a bonus walkover over India so as to attack us in Arunachal later in this year? Is the present withdrawal a ruse to make us lower or our guard?
Ravi, sir, I don't think this could be a ruse to make our lower our guard, because I think as we speak, and I know the troops there, they would be on the highest state of alert for a very long time. They're not going to come down, in a hurry, because that is there's so much of thing which is at stake. So they're not going to lower their guard at any cost, and because like once bitten twice shy, we will now be ready for anything. So is it a testing of waters? Like, I mean, one doesn't really do not know, but it seems unlikely that they just wanted to carry out this entire 10 months operations for just to test our what is our resolve and such like thing. I mean, unlikely, but you cannot rule it out. I mean, there's anything with Chinese, anything is possible, but it does seem unlikely that it was just a testing of waters. It could have been much. It could have been, as I mentioned, much more than that. And whatever the strategic intent, only time will say, or maybe even that we will never come to say. But definitely, it doesn't look like testing of waters for 10 months.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Mr. L.V. Krishnan. Is it likely that China would apply pressure on India to join BRI, having agreed to return to position even behind what was expected, claiming good behavior on their part?
Ma'am, I think Alka ma'am can take on this question, ma'am. I think she is best suited to answer, if you can, ma'am. Or I think she's General Narasimhan, sir. If you
yeah, I'll do that. What I suggest, Dinny, you go ahead with the questions. In the end, I'll cover all this.
All right, sir. Then
I've noted on all the questions. I'll cover it.
Okay, so I'll give my point of view also.
Sorry, I was on mute, so I didn't realize I was on mute.
But you people are better suited. I have my own views, but I think we would like to hear your views.
No.
Over to you.
I think China has more or less given up this idea that they are going to somehow puslao India into joining the BRI. I think that on that there is a fairly clear now understanding on the Chinese side that India is not going to join the BRI till such time as the CPEC and the whole question of the BRI passing through that CPEC Indian territory is sorted out, and that's not going to be resolved. So, in effect, we have actually put ourselves out of that kind of bargain. So, I don't think this is going to make the sagacious heads in Delhi be, kind of get beguiled by so-called good Chinese behavior. As I said, I don't think it is good Chinese behavior in any case. So that's not likely. That's all I want to say.
I completely agree with you, ma'am. There's nothing more to add. Next question, ma'am.
Yeah. Next question is from Mr. Balasubramanian. Haven't the Chinese achieved their objective in an indirect way? We went on buying spare shopping for arms like rifles, etc. Haven't the Chinese evaluated Indian response and understood their own weaknesses only next time to strike harder and smarter?
Shri Bala, that what I would definitely say, as I mentioned, there are takeaways from both sides. So the thing of Chinese having achieved the objective in an indirect way may not be the thing. Firstly, we need to know what was the objective in the direct way. So since we have still yet to come to terms that what was the Chinese objective in the direct way, so it is very difficult to say that whether they have achieved the objective in an indirect way. Number one. Number two, this kind of, we went on a buying spree for Rafales and all. Actually, the thing was much earlier. It that happened that, of course, some thing the speeding up, and as I mentioned, that focus has come to thing. And but as I think General Narasimhan also would agree that even after this, there is a lot many things needs to be done. It is just a blessing in disguise that this Chinese issue had come, and that now there is a broad understanding within the government, within the parliament, outside, that there is lot many things to be done. And that is just not because to take on China or something. It is that it is a bare minimum required for our Indian, for our operational balance as far as India and Pakistan, all those things are concerned. So I think this is no reason that they have done this. So they have pushed us. I think it is a need of our time that we should have done all what we have done. I think we need to do more, is what my understanding is. I think one more question was there of the KV Thomas, that he mentions that Chinese Premier Xi time and again rated that bilateral relations between India and China should not be linked to the border disputes and related matter. What is the comment on this background of disengagement exercise? See, this thing again is, I think Anand Krishna also mentioned it beautifully, that there's two issues which are, I think, drastically, there's a contrast. And one is that we say that, okay, resolve the border issue for improving ties. Chinese says improve ties and then the border issue will be resolved. So there is, this kind of a thing which we cannot arrive at in a common ground. So I think it will be very difficult to put first what the border dispute should be resolved, or let's improve the thing. This will happen for a very long time. I think the disengagement exercise will definitely disengagement and followed by de-escalation and peace and tranquility. It has to come to peace and tranquility as not even in April 2020. I think it should be even during April 2020 and all, things were not that kind of it was there, that simmering was always there. So we have to move into a much more situation in which there is actual peace and tranquility. If that is then achieved, probably then talks and all can happen for finally resolving the border issue and thereby leading to improved ties, is my understanding.
Next question is from Mr. Ateria. What role do nuclear weapons play in the Indian-China tensions? Besides direct threat, are they sharing nuclear technology with Pakistan? Is Modi adopting a policy of appeasement towards China?
I think the best person to answer this would be General Narasimhan, but I'll put in my comment. Just that, see, the nuclear weapons is a reality between two countries. So nuclear weapons are a deterrent, and that is a truth, that because there are nuclear weapons, the war as such is avoided to a great extent. There's no doubt, So that way, there is no doubt that the presence of nuclear weapons on both sides is a deterrent. Now, sharing technology with Pakistan, of course, we know that China has done all those things for so many years, so there's nothing new in it, and they will continue to do it because they know that Pakistan is also something they can use as a pressure tactics against India. So there's nothing which is different, as I feel. Is Modi adopting a policy of appeasement towards China? I mean, very difficult. I mean, I have not seen any kind of policy in which it looks like an appeasement, especially after this kind of this whole conflict which has taken place. I think it has been fairly handled well by the political leadership of, as I mentioned, as a whole of nation approach, in which I think we were firm. So we were not too, kind of aggressive, but we were firm on ground, is what my understanding is.
Next question is from Mr. Tanvi J. Kishan. He has appreciated your presentation and he has two questions, sir. First, what kind of ISR has the IA put in place to make sure the Chinese do not occupy Kailash and other ranges sometime in the future? Second, with this advantage, why did IA not link the issues of the South Bank disengagement to Depsang? Okay, sorry, sir. Understand that Depsang is the legacy issue, but what cards do India have to ensure status quo ante April 2020 there?
Okay, as far as the ISR capability is concerned, today we are very well off as far as the ISR capability is concerned. So today we have the UAVs. We have, if you want to have satellite images, those are available. You have the Air Force assets. So as far as the ISR thing is concerned, I think today we are fairly well off, rather than by the time let's say about 15-20 years or maybe before that we had an issue. But today I think fairly well off. We have the BFSR to pick up what is the thing. So we can pick up the movement. The only thing, like any other place, we can't pick up the intent. So that intent is the problem. You can't make it. You can't judge the intent, but definitely all those movements and all can definitely be picked up is what. And regarding this issue of South Bank disengagement to Dapsang, I think General Narasimhan also mentioned that this is a gradual phase, and this whatever we did on the South Bank or on the Kailash range resulted in an agreement in all other issues also, in the sense that people are now ready to at least talk on those issues. And the first, I think General Y.K. Joshi also mentioned that it is in 4 phases. The first phase is what has happened is, the tanks have moved back, and now the North Bank is being vacated. And then after this entire thing, after 48 hours, the commanders will come, and then they will start talking on the other issues also. And I don't see a reason why, if they can, reach a reasonable agreement on peace and tranquility on the northern bank and the southern bank and other areas, the Depsang issue also, some sort of agreement would be there, but it will take a lot of, I think, effort, because the issues there is a little different than what is it in Pangong or South Bank.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Commodore Ravi Mani. Some observers feel that the present withdrawal is largely due to harsh winter and is not an indicator of Chinese intentions for the future.
I don't agree that it is because of the harsh winter, because the winters are almost over now. If you see the photographs, also some of the even the frozen lake, the Pangong, which freezes completely, and you can take a vehicle across it during winters. It is also now showing, those photographs are not showing some sort of water and all is there. We can see at least in some parts. So the harsh winters is actually is over. Now the winters will still continue to be there for some more time, but the harsh winters are definitely over. And I don't think professional armies, and I'm not saying that just because Indian Army, but even if there is a task given, I think they will do that. Whether what is harsh or whether it is severe, it is. And we, especially Indians, we are there in Siachen also, so it doesn't matter for us also. So I'm sure the Chinese also, they are fairly professional enough to do that. So I don't think that may be the reason.
So another question from Ateria. The issue of next Dalai Lama continues to be a bone of contention. How can it best solved?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer. I think I'll allow that ball to go, outside the off stump without playing. So I'll leave it to General Narasimhan sir to take on that.
So, shall I move to the next question?
Yeah,
then?
sure.
Mr. Avnish Kumar has asked, China has revealed that 4 of its soldiers died in border clash with Indian troops. Why China has revealed such information after this engagement?
See, as a policy, we all know that Chinese never give out the exact figures of their casualties. I think the 1962 casualties was revealed somewhere in the time of 80s, if I'm not wrong. I think maybe early 80s is what the figures they had given. The official version had come out, and that also was interestingly was much higher than actually what was given earlier. So I read somewhere that the casualties suffered by the Chinese, especially in the area of Ladakh and during the Battle of Razangla, was much higher. So that initial impact, whatever we had in the area Arunachal and Assam areas, was the narrative or the psyche was that okay, we lost a huge war with and suffered huge casualties with China. But once the Chinese themselves put out those casualties in the 80s, the data was actually stark, and it showed that they also had a large number of casualties. So as a policy, they never divulged their casualties immediately. They have never told what is the casualties in 79. I think China-Vietnam war also, they have never mentioned how many died. So there was no reason for them to mention. They would have found a reason to mention now. And as General Narasimhan mentioned, that it is just those four or five people who have been given some sort of a recognition, because as we been reading, there is a lot of backlash. At least, I mean, like Alka ma'am said, whether we don't know whether it is right or wrong, but there were reports that there was some sort of a backlash in China about why their soldiers were not being recognized, especially people who had died. So those kind of reports also came out, and also it was linked to some reports also which mentioned that in today's China, where there is only one child policy was there, if the only son dies, naturally there's going to be that much more resentment and all which is there. I think if you just analyze it in a human angle, any loss in any family, any country, there's bound to be anger, there's bound to be sorrow, there's bound to be resentment, and more so if those things are not coming out. So I think they were just trying to pacify in some manner so that at least something is mentioned outside. And also now, since they know that so many inputs are coming out, this is another main ways of showing, okay, only we acknowledge 5, so people will stick to that. Okay, they only actually had 5 casualties. So those kind of things are there, that why they found it this particular moment, once a disengagement is taking place, to give those inputs.
Thank you, sir. There is a question posed by Commodore Russell Deshmukh, sir. He has asked, China has been untrustworthy. Can we afford to be complacent? Isn't there a chance of coming back with vengeance? Will it be advisable to presume normalcy would be restored and we start on economic relations?
See, this question, everybody, time and again, people keep that, and I think even in Twitter, the favorite line is that don't trust China, China can't be trusted. Let me tell you that the people who are most worried are the people on ground. Because the person who is there on ground is the most worried, because it directly affects whatever Chinese action does. And whenever we were there, we used to not only once, twice, and thrice, we check again and verify again and do. Then only we used to agree to any kind of a thing. But then it's a situation, or the ground dynamics is that you can't be sitting at one place for 24/7 into 365. There are times you have to come back. So, and he has the options. So having said that, let's have for a way ahead, we have to find some common ground. And this time, the best part, but what I liked about this agreement is that this time it is a written agreement. So that written agreement says that okay, these are the things which you will do, these are the things which have been done. What I found out also was that after each step being taken, there is a on ground verification down at the commander level, and also there is a hotline call. Okay, you moved this, we've done this, there's a verification. So those kind of things have gone into it, and I think so we need to be a little more positive as far as the Chinese intention of disengagement is concerned, because otherwise things will not move anywhere. There's a saying, to trust everybody is dangerous, but to trust no one is even more dangerous. So let's at least give little more, some sort of thing to take this forward.
Thank you, sir. There's a question by Mr. Rishi Atria. He has asked, is it time that should India raise issues of Tibet, Xinjiang, and Inner Mongolia at a global level?
This again is, it's a very hypothetical question, but I don't think India will do that. I mean, I don't know whether there are any diplomats. I don't think that has been our style of diplomacy throughout whatever we have seen, whichever government has been there. We don't believe in playing up such issues on international forum in such a manner. I really doubt those things are going to happen. We may do a subtle kind of a thing which we need to do, but I at that level, I really doubt whether we will be doing it.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Bamadev, who has connected from Nepal, he has asked this question. Despite of conflict between India and China on border, they have good and bulk trading and investment ties. Is such stalemate hampering future course of trading and investment, sir?
With India, he is mentioning about with India?
Yeah, with India and China, so between India and China. See,
that's what exactly what I what I mentioned, that probably both countries didn't want this to get into such a situation in the first place. That's my understanding, because the losses are for both countries, whatever may be the reason. If let's just assume for a moment that this thing would not have happened, you see, both countries would have benefited. There's no doubt. So naturally, it is in the interest of both the nations that as responsible neighbors, as mutually respectful neighbors, we need to address each other's concern and move ahead, and that will be beneficial for both. Is in today's scenario is what my opinion is.
Thank you, sir. One last question from the chat box. China has revealed that 4 of its soldiers died in border clash with Indian troops. Why China has revealed such information after disengagement?
I think I already answered the question.
I think we have come to the end of the session. May I now request Lieutenant General Narasimha sir for his remarks, please, sir?
Thank you very much, Bala. I'll just take on a few questions, and then that I think will sum up the whole thing, actually speaking. One question was Mr. Thomas on China and Indian Ocean region. They have something known as, 3 seas, 2 borders, and 2 far oceans. So Indian Ocean region comes into the 2 far oceans. So basic thing is that it will come into play, but not now. It will come into play at a much, much future date, and I'm sure we are aware of it, and we are taking adequate action regarding that. Second thing is on Bala's question regarding, on the CPR's non-alignment 2.0. Please understand, even in this summer incidents, aim has been to localize it. If you could have actually, Indian Army or any other, even the Chinese Army could have opened up another place. It is very easy to do that. But both the sides refrained from doing it and restricted it to Eastern Ladakh. So please understand, escalations of that nature will snowball into a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. We should be mentally and otherwise capable of handling that, depending on the economic situation, the other situations, international relationship situations. We need to take a call on that. I think both the sides did very well to keep it localized to Eastern Ladakh. The other thing on Wing Commander Mani's question on will it be a ruse to attack ALP, Arunachal Pradesh? I am sure everybody was aware of it. If you look at the Indian Army's actions post what happened in Ladakh, I am sure they all had catered for this, and in future also they'll continue to cater for it. Another question is on the on the peace and tranquility along the border. Again, came from Mr. Thomas. When the relationship between India and China was restarted in 1988, even before that it was restarted actually, with the ambassadors going at 1976, and the talks on the boundary starting at 1981. But the major turnaround came around 1988. The basis on which we were turning around that relationship was the prerequisite of peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. We had actually adjusted to some extent in other areas, but this time around, that particular thing has been driven home very strongly to the Chinese. That peace and tranquility along the line of actual control is the prerequisite for proceeding along the other aspects of the bilateral relationship. This also answers the other question on the trade relationship, which came from Dr. Bamadev. Please understand, there was always a stress in this trade relationship between India and China. And that stress was in terms of trade deficit that was being faced by India. Second thing is, if you disaggregate the basket of the trade, you found most of the exports from India were actually in the terms of raw material, and China was actually value adding it and selling it back to you. So there was already a relationship problem there, trade relationship problem. The second thing was non-availability of a level playing ground for Indian companies in China. Chinese companies were easily able to come in because of the opening that we did, but there were a lot of barriers, including non-tariff barriers put against the Indian companies. The provisions for opening up and gaining an entry into China was also very, very difficult. So there was already a relationship problem there. Only this kind of incident has aggravated this. Even now, there is no embargo on trade. There are many. In fact, if you look at the kind of action that India has taken, China has actually not retaliated to that so far. It may happen sometime in future, I don't know. But so far it has not related. Why? The reason is simple. Raw material value addition selling back is the process. So that process has to go unhindered. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. The other thing is about the control over PLA, Mr. Thomas. I am very clear that Xi Jinping has got a very, very clear control over PLA. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts that aspect at all. Linking Depsang and other issues, if you look at the Ministry of Defense statement which came out, it came out very clearly and said that all these areas are going to be addressed in the next phase of talks. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. All of them are in our focus. Can we be complacent? I don't think we are, and neither will be in future. We'll be complacent about it. On the question of Dalai Lama, please understand, Dalai Lama's question is a very, very serious question that has to be dealt with very seriously. There are a lot of options that have been worked out, even including His Holiness Dalai Lama has come out with many options. He said a small child could be his reincarnation. He said a girl could be reincarnation. There may not be a reincarnation. Many kinds of options he has already put it up himself. But we really don't know how this play is going to take place. But what we do know is that the Chinese are actually preparing for that kind of a situation whenever it comes. I mean, it may not be coming anytime in the near future, but whenever it comes. In the recent past, a couple of articles appeared in Chinese, which talked about the supremacy of the central government of China to appoint the Dalai Lama. And they talked about some historical facts and other things which I always try to do. And there was also a TV show based on those articles. So basic thing is that there is some kind of a thing that is being worked out in China. We are aware of it. And I'm sure many options are being worked out by the government. We will not go into the details of it here. But I think it is already on the focus. I think I'll finish it here. Thanks. I will be failing in my duty if I don't thank Dinny for his very diligent talk that he gave. And with his ground experience, it's always a pleasure to listen to him. And also to the audience to give a patient hearing, and also the number of questions which came up always indicates that this kind of a presentation is actually very well received. And we thank the audience also for their patient hearing and participation. Thank to Dr. Alka Acharya for her remarks in between. And I'm sure we'll keep interacting with her in future also. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Narasimhan sir, for taking all our questions and succinctly giving all your responses. May I now request Ms. Shivani to please present the vote of thanks?
Just 1 second. Can I just take 5 seconds? I think Atreya has put up that question of the nuclear issue. Please understand, Atreya, nuclear weapons are not weapons of war fighting. You don't fight a war with nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are actually a political deterrent. That is something that we need to keep in mind. The second thing is the deterrence in the nuclear issue, the deterrence only exists till the time you use the first weapon. Thereafter, there is no deterrence. Thereafter, you open the floodgates. Okay? So, nuclear weapons, yes, they may keep, if you look at I'll take two parallels. One is India-China. We both have no first use. Our nuclear doctrine clearly indicates no first use in both the countries. Whereas it is not the same case with Pakistan. Pakistan's nuclear doctrine indicates and clearly says that it will use the weapon as the first use. So these two are two different things. You can't actually compare both. That is number one. Number two, even in case of Pakistan, I think that they're just trying to call a bluff. They're just trying to bluff with this particular first use doctrine. Because they also very well know the moment the first weapon is used, India's nuclear doctrine clearly says it will be a massive response. Okay. So they also know, basically because of these issues, nuclear thing, yes, you keep it in the backdrop, but they are deterrent. And I don't think anybody is going to use it as a war-fighting weapon. It is a political deterrent weapon, and that will be dealt with accordingly.
Thank you, sir. Shivani, you may please present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to one and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks in the conclusion of the C3S institutional dialogue on decoding India-China disengagement. At the outset, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our speaker for the day, Colonel S. Dinny, for accepting our invitation to share his inputs with us all. I take this opportunity to thank Commodore R.S. Vasan, Director of C3S, for his support in helping make this event possible. I thank esteemed members of C3S for bringing valuable discussion to the table and enlightening us during the event. I would also like to thank all those who have participated in this C3S webinar and made this event both productive and engaging. I also place on record my appreciation to C3S team consisting of Mr. C. Balasubramanian and Ms. Aishwarya S. Menon for all the support rendered by them to make this event a success. Thank you all once again, and Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Jai Hind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind. Thank you, sir.